Do you crave better self-esteem and confidence, but struggle to silence your anxiety, fears, and insecurities? If so, welcome to the sisterhood of fellow travelers on the path to reclaiming their self-confidence and happiness. I'm Jennifer DeBellis, award-winning author, speaker, and assault survivor. I spent the past few decades helping young women like you overcome fear, self-doubt, and trauma to reclaim their joy and self-worth. I cannot wait to share the secrets I learned on my own healing journey and help you restore your inner warrior as I show you the skills and tools you need to save your own broken world. If you're ready to empower your inner warrior to overcome fear, doubt, and anxiety, turn off those distractions and tune in to this episode. If you aren't currently a member of my Facebook community of young women just like you, the Restore Your Inner Warrior Sisterhood group, find us on Facebook. Here's a safe space to get tips, share stories, and find community support. You can also subscribe to my email list on this link embedded here on this page. Today, we're going to finally begin the journey that leads to improved self-esteem and confidence. I know how real the struggle is to confront the giants known as anxiety, fear, and self-doubt, only to keep ripping the old wounds open while just trying to hold it all together. Can I tell you a secret? You really do hold the power to conquer these struggles, and I'm about to show you how. I put together this Restore Your Inner Warrior series with power-packed tools that will help you strengthen your inner warrior and overcome the things holding you back from living your best life. If you're ready to boldly step into a life of happiness and better confidence, turn off those distractions running in the background so you can kickstart your healing journey with this next episode. And welcome to all my listeners already walking with me down this restoration path. In this episode, in a 5-part series, you'll hear about a catastrophic life event that left me with no choice but to confront my fears and anxieties. You'll discover your inner warrior and learn tools to live with more happiness and confidence. You'll learn 5 secrets to healing internal wounds with an in-depth look at secret number 1. If it's broken, it won't work right or heal right without the right attention. You'll see grief from a new perspective and how to navigate it during your healing process. And you'll also gain some insights into dealing with the fear of rejection. I want to talk to you about an important step for you to take to rediscover your value and confidence, which is, if it's broken, it won't heal right without the right attention. This applies to internal healing just as it does to physical healing. The bottom line is that things don't just fix themselves. It's up to us to assess the damages of life's storms and do the necessary repairs. Imagine that you're on a ship at sea and you have to stabilize your boat after a really bad storm. You realize that you and your ship have taken some really hard hits and the damages must be assessed and repaired so you don't sink and drown in these post-storm waters. Since the damage is already done, the trick is to keep your focus off of what happened and to stay focused on what has to happen as a result. Because here's the thing, you can't control what has already happened to you. You can only control what you do to repair the damages and move forward. I talk about this repair process in my self-help book, Warrior Sister Cut Yourself Free. Here it is, isn't it beautiful? It just came out in a 2nd edition. I'm really excited about it. But anyway, I do talk about this, and I talk about that to repair something that's physically broken, we must allow it to heal, and then we must do the certain things to aid in that healing process. When it comes to healing the human spirit and mind, that healing process looks a little different. We must give ourselves permission to heal internally. God knows the world doesn't often give us permission to do this work with its suck it up, get over it, people have survived worse messages. But the thing is, we can't build our lives on a broken foundation and expect it to stay standing. Allowing ourselves to work through the internal wounds is exactly how we repair and restore our inner world. Many of my young adult years were overshadowed by the way I dealt with, or more accurately, didn't deal with my internal wounds. My healing process began the moment I realized I couldn't just suck it up, bury it deeper, get over it with the snap of a finger, or pretend that it didn't exist. I don't know if you're like me, but I didn't learn this lesson the easy way. Oh no, it wasn't until my entire world collapsed over me that I realized I needed to deal with my fears, doubts, and insecurities like my life depended on it, because it did. Imagine one day I'm a bride with dreams of my perfect wedding just 4 weeks away. And the next moment, I'm in a serious motorcycle accident that leaves me severely injured. It's a miracle I survived that accident and the grueling years of therapies that followed. Here's the thing, though. What didn't kill me that day did make me stronger, as the saying goes, even though I didn't feel very strong going through any of it. For the first time in my young adult life, I suddenly had all the time in the world to just focus on me, and that turned out to be the hardest part of my rehabilitation. Until that accident, I had spent years burying my fears, my failures, my anxieties, and self-doubt by always staying busy. When I could no longer run from the emotional trauma that surfaced during those long, quiet days, I knew things had to change. I tried traditional therapy, and that just didn't work for me. So I researched ways to resolve my inner conflicts. I literally went up to the library like I did as a kid and found books and found articles and asked the librarians, how do I deal with this? How do I deal with that? Because back then, the World Wide Web didn't exist yet. I know now you are a little bit luckier because you can just search it, throw a term into the search engine and see what it comes up with. But you don't always get good information either, so you got to be careful. But literally, we have so much at our fingertips. And like this podcast, I love that you are here right now with me, seeking ways to improve yourself, which is a very powerful first step. So as I put my research findings to the test, my trials, errors, and perseverance did help me discover 5 powerful ways to work through my anxieties, fears, and self-doubt from the inside out. The first secret was that we must assess and fix the broken things from within so that they heal the right way. I don't mean like little things either. I mean the big things. We're designed to function in particular ways, and when something inside us is broken, we just can't function properly. Everything we were created relies on our ability to function the way we were designed. We cannot fully fulfill our purpose in any given situation if we refuse to address the broken areas and do the necessary repairs. One of the things that I learned about inner healing is how our trauma is connected to grief and how grief comes in stages as our trauma triggers it. So when I found out about Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grief, some of these stages resonated with me, yet others didn't quite apply to me. But I got to tell you, finding something that started to outline the idea that grief has different parts and different stages was probably the most instrumental thing for me dealing with my emotional recovery right after that motorcycle accident, because for the first time, it put things into a perspective that I had never considered that way before. I mean, we think about grief, or maybe it was just the way I looked at grief from this perspective of you have these feelings, you don't know what to do with them. It makes you cry a lot. It makes you depressed. There's a sense of loss there. And, you cry through it. You spend this time in aloneness, and what happens in that aloneness is a mystery. Nobody really knows. And then you come out and you're done with the grief process. This very shallow, immature concept of what grieving looked like. And at a very, very basic level, yes, those things are there, but there are literal moving parts in it that I started to recognize by being exposed initially to those first 5 stages. And then I started to adapt them. Some of those stages, they fit right in. And then some of them I had to say, well, how does this or that fit into my inner healing process? Because mine was a little bit different. I was dealing with overcoming abuse and physical violence trauma. And so that looked a little bit different. But I do break these down in Warrior Sister, Cut Yourself Free, and they are very targeted to those areas. But the more I start to work with these more generalized topics of just how to overcome trauma, how to overcome fear and doubts, I recognize that again, most of those stages can apply to
to us in situations outside of trying to overcome those particular types of trauma. And so the interesting thing is that these grief stages allow us to heal and train ourselves to get through those inner wounds. And it's hard work, but it's necessary work that we must do to restore ourselves. And if that word train jumped out at you, good, because you should know that there's some hard work for you ahead. But healing is hard work and you're worth it. So you have to remember that you're doing the hard work for something that is invaluable, you. The 8 stages of grief that I developed and adapted in my book are shock and denial, pain, recall, guilt and shame, anger, depression, hope and acceptance, and recovery. And if you're a symbols person like I am, then those last 2 jumped out at you. Symbolically, 7 symbolizes like reaching a point of perfection or completeness where things are finished. And 8 represents a realization or overcoming. And I didn't plan how these things would fit into the layout, but they came together in these really magical ways. And it's just fascinating how they connect there. What I knew was that hope and acceptance, the 7th stage, brings us to a place where we have made peace with the bad stuff and have this hope moving forward. That's a really important combination of steps that kind of work, they feed off of each other. And then, that particular step kind of signifies like the end of a cycle, but it seemed really weird for me to just end it there. So the whole point in restoring that inner warrior is to navigate the cycle and what comes after it. So I just felt like I needed that 8th step as a marker, like, okay, you need to enter this recovery, which is like, a place of enlightenment, and it's the beginning of a new journey toward restoration. And so that's ultimately what that last step comes in, because in the end, a healed and whole inner warrior is a powerful force. And that's what we're talking about here with the Restore Your Inner Warrior concept. So when we learn how to assess our grief, particularly those things that trigger anxiety, fear, doubt, trauma, insecurities, we can then navigate the different stages with targeted strategies. So that's kind of key, is to be able to train ourselves about how to recognize the different parts of grief and then how to recognize the different triggers within that so that we can apply the right tools to succeed in the end. Ultimately, we want to get through it. We want to heal. We want to recover. We want to boldly keep living with confidence and value and happiness. There's nothing worse than trying to get through life with a feeling of with a loss of happiness. So an intriguing paradox here is that as we work on fixing the broken areas within, it actually helps us more easily identify our fears and our doubts and what triggers them. It's not the other way around. We don't say, okay, let me identify my fear. Let me identify my doubt. Let me identify my insecurity. And then I'm going to go to work on fixing the broken areas in my life, because it's so hard. I mean, it's not that you can't do it that way, but it's like opening up a box and saying, I'm going to put together this. I just built a whole bunch of furniture for one of my daughters. And as much as I'm creative and I love it, it just came with no good instructions. And it was just endless work that was really hard to figure out. But the thing that I'm talking about here is that as we see this thing that's already, we can kind of know how it's supposed to work optimally if it's in working order. And so we're looking at something and trying to figure out how to fix the broken areas. And then we're noticing, oh, it's not working because there's a crack here, or this little thing is missing or broken, or it's just twisted the wrong way. And then we start to identify those things. And it's much easier to look at this whole thing. I know I'm using a metaphor, but it's much easier to look at this whole thing and then figure out, identify, right? What exactly is this little thing? What's it, and not just what is it? What triggered it to be broken? Is because the thing is a lot of times these areas become chronic areas of brokenness in us. And so you're looking for the triggers so that you can also navigate not setting off those triggers, or having a plan in place for when you want those triggers to be silenced or to be handled more appropriately. It's much harder to live a purpose-driven life if we're walking around broken, with things that really need to be fixed. This is why I recommend starting with learning about grief and how to work through the stages to fully heal. Until I learned how to do this, I was only going through the motions of living instead of living to my fullest potential and purpose. I heard an interesting thing about purpose recently, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about it ever since. Did you know that to fulfill a purpose means to be in the service of others? That's a really interesting thing. It's hard to be in good working service for our intended use when there are major things broken in us that hinder our optimal function. I'm not talking about little flaws here. I mean foundational things. Take a wheelbarrow, for instance. Its framework is a simple construction, yet it's capable of doing incredible things. Like it can move mountains. Rock by rock, load by load, yes, but it can move mountains. Yet a wheelbarrow is just a bucket on a frame with one wheel, two arms and legs. That's it. It's a super simple structure that's capable of doing incredible things. If just one of these elements is missing, though, or not working right, the whole thing malfunctions. You can't push a wheelbarrow with one arm only. You can't rest it down if one of the legs is missing. And you certainly can't move it around if it's missing the tire. Even a flat tire makes it extremely difficult to use, which is the state of every single wheelbarrow on my property. My husband and I, we live on a 6-acre estate, and for years we've done different landscaping jobs. And so back in the day when we did a lot of these jobs, all the good wheelbarrows were either out on a job or they never made it back home. You know how that goes with your good stuff. It just never finds its way back home. So I was left here with all the retired ones, the ones with the flat or wobbly tires. Every time I tried to use one, the tire would go flat almost immediately. And I would tell my husband, hey, can you fix the tire? And he would go, yeah, I'm on it. And his idea of being on it was to just fill it up with air. But the problem is that the tube actually had a leak. So he'd fill it up, and within minutes or maybe within an hour, it would be flat again. And then I would be trying to push around, which is very difficult to maneuver this wheelbarrow with a flat tire. You have to make really small loads. It was awful. And so what ended up happening is I just made a decision to stop trying to use something that didn't regularly work for me. So I started using a wagon, and the wagon is a little bit bigger. It's a little bit clunkier to use. And if you remember, I'm a motorcycle accident survivor, so I deal with regular pain. So like trying to pull it with a bad shoulder and move it around. But you know what? I still went to the wagon time after time because it was reliable. Because it did the job. And I wasn't going to keep going back to something that didn't do the job, or that I was going to have to come and empty the wheelbarrow into the wagon once it just died in the middle of the property. This is a similar way our relationships work in life. If we aren't capable of fulfilling our intended purpose, we aren't much good to ourselves, and we certainly aren't good to any of the people in our life. So when we are badly broken or missing major parts, it's hard to function through our day. As for the people relying on us, they'll simply just find another solution. We can't take offense to that. We can't feel rejected by that because we need to get what we need to get done, right? I don't want you to think about what I'm saying here. Don't internalize it or take it like I'm saying that, here we are talking about we're definitely broken and how do we repair things to restore our lives and to fix our broken worlds. And I'm not saying like if you're broken, you're not usable or you're disposable or you don't have any value. That's not at all what I'm saying. I'm saying that we need to fix certain areas so that we can function, so that we can get through the day. I'm not talking about the wounds that we have as a result or the cracks or all those little nicks and flaws and dings, like if you have a good piece of furniture and it has things in it that remind us like, oh, that's been around for a while. It's gotten a little bit banged up and it's still holding strong. I think about this broken concept. And I'm constantly reminded of a Rumi quote, which is the wound is where the light gets in. And I want you to let that kind of sink in, okay? Because here's the thing. You think about like inner healing in this world of like inner trauma and all these foreign feelings that you have and you don't know how to navigate them. And think about that like this is like this dark space. It's like a chest, right? Like you have a chest where you keep things in it, or a drawer, and it's in the dark, right? And it's like when you crack open the chest or you crack open the drawer, the light comes in and then you're able to see it. If you're in the dark and you're trying to navigate through, you might know your way around your own chest, or you might know your way around your own drawers. But you got to remember, right, what you put in there last. And if you took something out, but if you've got a drawer full of shirts, you're probably not going to remember what order all the shirts are. So if you're going in there in the dark and trying to pull one out, it's probably not going to go 100%. You're not going to be like, oh, every time. But when we're talking about brokenness and going into a space that we're not really familiar with what's in there, we have no idea in some instances what things other people threw into our chest or into our drawer. And so we're in this dark space with all these foreign objects and we don't know how to navigate them. Things are broken. And then you let a little bit of light in. And that light it allows you to see things differently. Literally and figuratively sheds light on something. So it allows you to see it, and now you can see it in a different way. Whereas before, maybe you were just using your hands and your memory, right? You were using those two senses to navigate around this space. And of course, it's clunky because you have a whole bunch of things in there that you have no idea. What is that? The rough edges? I don't know. That doesn't feel familiar. That doesn't seem familiar. And now you're bringing in light. So you totally change your vantage point. And that is the second point about fixing what is broken. A first step is overcoming an obstacle is to change the way you see it so that you can change the way you respond to it. That is key. If you just let a little bit of light into your inner wound and begin to see it in a different way, then you can respond to it in a different way. You can figure out, do I need to bring a whole new set of tools to this? Do I already have the tools for this? You don't know if you can't see it. You don't know. So that idea of the wound being the place that actually lets the light in is a really profound thing that, I could talk about a whole episode, and maybe I will do a whole episode on just that particular thing. But right now, I want to talk about how that, like, bringing this light in can do interesting things also. Like take the fear of rejection and the social anxiety that it evokes. Okay. Think about that I just went there. I just try to think about like, what is a common thing that maybe we might have in common. And I know that many people deal with a fear of rejection. When we talk about fear, it's an abstract word. And I say, well, what do you mean by fear? And then people start to list off, and there's usually, you can count it on one hand. Fear of rejection is always in the top 3. And so that fear of rejection is something I can completely relate to it. And so it is literally a concept that has such deep roots in me from back when I was even a kid. I moved around a lot when I was little. I went to 4 schools just to finish elementary school. I want you to let that sink in. 4 schools. So literally every few weeks, in some instances, I'm picking up and I'm moving in. Sometimes we're moving in the middle of the night. I'm not getting to say goodbye to my friends. I'm leaving things behind. I'm in these new spaces and I'm starting a new school, and there's all new people, right? There's new teachers to get used to. There's new friends, right? There's new kids that you go to school with, and we want to go and we want to belong, right? We want to be accepted. So maybe belong is not the right word. We don't want to adapt to this, that we're not ourselves anymore. We want to be accepted for who we are. And so we're trying to figure out, like, how does that look? So when I was younger, I got this very deep-rooted perspective that codependency is the optimal relationship. I know that's going to seem really weird to some of you, but maybe you can relate. Okay, so I kept mistaking codependency as the optimal relationship. And so there's a saying that goes, when you don't feel wanted, you make yourself feel needed. And that was exactly what I was doing as a kid and how I built friendships. So I believed that making myself useful led to acceptance rather than rejection. And so I quickly developed this formula that was make yourself useful. So if you lead with that, if you just make yourself useful right away, then you're going to minimize the amounts of rejection that you receive. And because people like people who do stuff for them. And so the thing is here, though, this is not the same concept that I'm talking about being in the service of others and fulfilling your purpose. Codependency is not healthy. It's actually counterintuitive to what I'm trying to establish with Restore Your Inner Warrior, which is the message that there is only one person on this earth who can save your broken world, and that's you. Yes, of course, God can help you and guide you. You can get the right support system to help and guide you, but no one can get inside of you. No one. And fix it and rewire it. It's like a surgeon, a physical, if you have a physical, something wrong inside of your physicality, a surgeon can come in and they can cut a tumor out. They can do put a stent in to get to reroute the blood flow in your heart. They can do all kind of things, but a surgeon can't come in and rewire you internally the same way. We're kind of left to do that kind of surgical and inner rewiring ourselves. And we have to figure out exactly how do we do that. And once we get those tools and we get those strategies, we have to keep putting that work in because we're the end. If we don't do it, it's not going to get done. So growing up, I invented and reinvented myself to fit the roles of what I believed others needed me to be, so that I would be easily accepted into relationships. I quickly fell victim to the people pleaser trap. Probably you too. That's probably something you struggle with. People who have a fear of rejection often struggle with the people pleaser thing. So I found myself constantly trying to do things for people, because then you start to get almost addicted or conditioned to expecting people's reaction to those things. Like, do you appreciate me? Did that help you? What else do you need me to do? And then you end up needing their constant approval. You need people to constantly be validating and an approval. So you fall into your own vicious cycle of seeking the approval of others, but then you also run the risk of developing a savior complex. Lots of people develop that. I know I have developed that. You run the risk of being someone else's savior, and it's an exhausting cycle to be that kind of a caretaker. We're not talking about the caretaker of someone who has to come deal with someone who's sick. I don't just mean even physically sick. I know there's a time when we're going through mental and emotional things where we need a good caretaker, and we need someone to do the things that we're just not in an ability to do in that moment. But those are temporary situations. Caretakers are not supposed to be forever. They're not supposed to, especially emotional caretaking. It's not supposed to be forever, because again, no one can do all of that work inside. They can just give you good advice. They can tell you good strategies to do. They can even give you books. They can give you, podcasts, TED Talks. They can keep, steering you to different things. They can give you good medications. They can give you all of these things. But again, you have to put in the work of cleaning up those broken areas and fixing and mending those broken areas. And so, because what happens in these kind of codependent caretaker relationships is they often lead to short-term and shallow relationships, because they're not built on the typical things that sustain relationships, like, I don't know, having things in common and doing things just to enjoy them, no strings attached. I'm not doing anything for you. You're not doing anything for me. We're just out having fun. We're just out doing something that we like to do. Mutual respect and support for one another often it's not reciprocated. It doesn't go both ways. It tends to be like one of those one-way doors. It's only, right, it only opens and shuts one way. And then this codependent is focused on short-term fixes to get through the tough times right in front of them. So it's kind of like this survival thing that they're going through. They're just like, man, I need to get through it. And this person is helping me so much get through it. And that, that's a very temporary survival type of a thing. Now, this can look differently in a family dynamic where long-term codependencies exist, because you're typically in longer-term relationships. So you might have a parent or a sibling or a spouse, or someone even in your extended family. It doesn't have to be into your immediate household, where these long-term codependencies exist, but yet the thing is those things become very toxic and unproductive and all those things. And a lot of times now you find yourself, you're trying to avoid rejection, and you're trying to be accepted, but then you're also trying to find your own escape route out of some of maybe the toxic interactions with that individual. And that's a whole different, that's a whole other cycle that we don't want to put ourselves in either, because then that starts to do all kind of unhealthy things to our inner space that we're actually trying to fix and trying to keep working optimally. So here's the thing though, the fear of rejection drives us caretakers into action in both instances. So it doesn't matter if it's these short-term interactions or these longer-term interactions, and who the heck knows if it's going to be long-term at the beginning of a codependent relationship. We don't. We just enter it with that caretaker mentality, which is helping others equals pleasing others equals acceptance. So it's this like pattern of doing this equals this equals this. And we just keep doing it. Okay, I need to be helpful, so I help others. I need to please others, so I need to do things that please them, and that will get me accepted. And if you notice that shift, this was something that I'm just the last couple of days when I was thinking about putting this message together, I really started thinking about this movement between, there's a difference between helping others and pleasing others. And so here's a really dangerous place here. That center place there where you're pleasing others is a really dangerous place to get, because now you start compromising who you are. You start like you're like a chameleon. You adapt completely. You change your spots. You change your colors to the environment. And while there are instances where that might be necessary and that might be good, like we don't act and maybe talk the same way in certain environments, we know how to behave differently, or what we can get away with casually that we can't get away with in more formal settings. I'm not talking about that stuff. I'm talking about the trap of acting completely like that's not you. Like maybe you don't swear in front of certain people, but you swear awfully like a truck driver in front of other people. I'm not talking about like those two differences. I'm talking about literally being a different person, where you have like checked your identity at the door, you hung it up on the coat tree out front, and you don't even remember what your name is, because my whole identity at this point now is just pleasing people. And so that's the part where I've been really thinking about, like, wow, we literally have to lose ourselves to do that. No wonder we kill our confidence and our value, because how can you confidently, unless you're an actor, how can you confidently act in situations other than how you really are? You have to, there's so much effort that you have to put into that. You can't slip up, because then you'll be rejected, right? If you slip up, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be accepted then. And that fear and that anxiety starts to, I got to get this right. I got to get this right. I got to get it perfect. I got to pull this off. And you're pulling off an act. And that's not how life works. And that's not how healthy confidence, and clearly that's not how our happiness, works. That's a miserable existence. And so caretakers, we get stuck in those types of cycles. And that is one of many reasons why people lose their identity, is because they're so stuck in that cycle, and they get lost in the pleasing part, where they're just constantly checking, okay, I can't be this, I can't be that. Next thing you know, there's nothing left of them. They're just doing everything they need to do to please other people, to act the way that they think they need to be acting in order to be accepted and not rejected. So it's an awful cycle to be stuck in. Caretakers also tend to trust too quickly. And this is dangerous when we make ourselves vulnerable in unsafe spaces. And I know sometimes it's hard to know that you're entering into a hard, unsafe space until you're there, and then stuff starts to go wrong, and you're like, oh my God, this is not a safe situation. But, it happens. And here's the thing. predatory people, and they're out there. We live in an age of predators. It's everywhere you look, and it's sad. We're constantly looking over our shoulder. I mean, it's awful. But predatory people, they're out there, and they're out there in droves, and they are drawn to caretakers. They're drawn to them just as codependents are. Predators understand how to covertly trigger us into action, where we are eager to strive, to be useful and please them so that we're accepted and not rejected. And it's a really interesting dichotomy. My entire coming of age experiences is overshadowed by this vicious cycle. And it never led to actual acceptance. It just put me in a perpetual cycle of different types of rejection or short-term acceptance that often just led to abandonment, which is another type of rejection that we can talk about another podcast. But it just never led me to where I thought it was. And it kept me returning to these unsafe spaces because there was a new set of characters that were going to be there. And I just kept thinking I might have better luck this time around, which is crazy. When you think about it, it's insanity. Like Einstein said, continuing to do the same thing over and over and over again, expecting different results is insanity. And yet sometimes when we're younger, we don't understand how that works. And we don't quite maybe put it together, or maybe it was just I didn't put it together, that it's not going to be different just because there are different people in the same environment with the same types of activities going on. And so it's a miracle worse things didn't happen to me growing up, but some bad things did happen to me. And they kind of added a lot of the trauma that then I had to deal with as a young adult. So, part of that was, again, trying to be that people pleaser as a way to be accepted, and going in and doing things and not saying no to the things that I should have been saying no to, that inside I might have been saying no to, or maybe outside I was saying no to, but it was like, if you keep pressing, maybe you'll get me to say yes, maybe you'll get me to go along with this. You work through those things and you hopefully learn the lessons, and eventually, like I did when I was recovering from that motorcycle accident, I had all day to think about these things. And there was a lot for me to unpack, and there was a lot of these things for me to kind of think about and to work through. And then as I got older and I became a writer, my first book, my coming of age stories, some of them I really had to sit down and I had to go back and revisit and look at it through the eyes of that girl that was experiencing it, so that I could get the story. I could get the accuracy of the details, and then look at it as the more grown and mature adult to say, okay, what can I glean from this? Or how can I understand this and see this differently? What can I understand about myself and my trauma and my triggers and my brokenness, and heal these things? And so, that healing process sometimes is a lifetime process in different areas. Like trauma can be that thing that you're just, and you don't know until it's triggered again. And then you're like, crap, I'm here. I am the wound. It's open. I got better. But the thing is, I still find myself striving to be helpful to others, but mostly I do it in a different way, and I do it for different reasons. And so here's something else I talk about in Warrior Sister Cut Yourself Free, is how love languages play into this. And so one of my love languages is acts of service. I wonder how that became a love language for me, acts of service. Anyhow, our own love walk with ourselves is built on sharing our love language with others, so it comes back to us in our own dialect. So you understand what I'm saying? So we speak our love language as we go out there in our dialect, because we want it to come back. So there's lots of different love languages, and it's good to love people in their love language. And sometimes we know what people's love language is because we're in relationships with them, or we know them. We have interactions with them, and we know enough about them to know, oh, that's their love language, or that's one of their love languages. But the thing is that's a really great thing to do also. But, it's important for us to practice our own love language. I dedicate a whole section of this in the book, and I actually built one of the 7 principles in my 30-day restoration journey is built on this idea of going out and doing things in our own love language so that we get it back in the same, we get back the same language. And it's like that reaping and sowing thing. But here's the thing. It's, we need to plant the things that we want to grow, period. So if we want to grow strawberries, we need to plant strawberry seeds, not corn seeds, not bean seeds. We need to plant strawberries to get strawberries, period. So that whole concept is super simple if you think about it. We need to practice the very things that we hope will be reciprocated back for us. And it's like, you can think of it another way, especially with the people who you do share a life with, is that you're teaching them your love language. You're teaching them through your acts, you're teaching them your love language. And so, if affirmation is a love language for you, again, you're going there. You're using that the same way you hope to receive it back. I'm not perfect in this area either. I've given it a lot of practice, but, I still sometimes trip up and I get sucked back into that old trap of striving to be helpful in chronic situations where I have really longed to be accepted, or I have felt rejected or abandoned or turned away. And, here's the sad truth. Not everyone will accept us, and striving to be helpful in a chronic situation where you're not welcome, pushing yourself on people, it's not going to lead to authentic acceptance that we crave. It's just not going to lead us there. I should qualify. We're looking for authentic acceptance. So some of the patterns that I've been sharing with you so far that I misread and developed bad habits where I was just like, I just get any acceptance. That's not healthy. We want to have healthy types of acceptance. And there's a particular way that you have to do that. And so there's a lot of talk these days about the let them theory. And sometimes we need to let people show us exactly where we do or don't fit into their lives. And then we need to deal with those feelings of rejection. Sometimes I feel like God is giving me a gift. Like I feel like there are instances where I've been rejected, or I feel as if I've been rejected, and that it's a gift of God. Some of these rejections, maybe they were meant to protect me or spare me from specific interactions or relationships. And they also keep me looking for my people. They keep me looking for those spaces where I will be accepted and I will thrive as my authentic self. And so rejection's going to happen. There's no way to avoid it. It's normal to feel the sting of rejection, even if it's only perceived rejection. Don't let anybody make you, dismiss your feelings. You can't let your feelings rule you, but sometimes we feel it and it's valid. It's there. It doesn't matter what the person intended. The fact is that we're trying to put ourselves out there and be vulnerable in a particular way, and we perceive this rejection, or we get the rejection. But the important thing here is that when we experience this, that we grieve it. We go through those grieving process steps, whatever they are for us. They won't be different. It won't be all 8 stages every time you have to go through something that requires grief. But we go through the appropriate grief stages, and then we make peace with it. We have to make that peace, because staying stuck in a state of offense, it only hurts us more. It's like that saying goes, you drink the poison expecting to make the other person sick. Doesn't make any sense. You drink it, it's only going to make you sick. So the same thing happens. We have to put ourselves back out there too. We can't stay like we're not created to stay in isolation and live in a vacuum. And yes, there's times to go and be alone and collect yourself and do all those things. But there's also a time to get back out there and make yourself vulnerable to developing those meaningful relationships and having those meaningful interactions. And so to get back to that fear of rejection in social settings, I know I made you squirm a little and then I kind of steered off a little. In order to improve your chances of receiving acceptance in social settings, we must face our fear from a new perspective. Once we get that new angle, then we have a really good chance that we'll succeed because we'll see things from a different way. We'll approach them from a different way. And, I know it's a lot more difficult. These social settings are more difficult for you because you grew up in a social media environment. So you spend more time in social interactions behind a screen than you do in face-to-face settings. And I know COVID kind of affected all of us that same way, where we were kind of like, okay, I can't lose my connection to the world. So we literally had this digital wire connecting us to everyone. And some people just didn't come back out into the face-to-face setting, but there's nothing like being face-to-face with people. We need to be face-to-face with people, and we need to see body language and experience. There's nothing like when you smile and someone reciprocates that smile, where you see it in their eyes, or you say something meaningful. And even though that person is being silent and listening, you see in their eyes that it touched them, or you see in their eyes that it resonated, or they're shaking, they're nodding their head, right? Like, yes, or no way, that doesn't apply to me. And you get all that body language that actually is a meaningful connection with people. And we rob ourselves of that by strictly limiting ourselves to only being like, oh, I'm only going to comment, I'm only going to post, and we cut that whole thing out. And maybe it's like, maybe you don't know any better, or maybe you're like, but it's safer. These are the safe spaces. I can delete a comment if I don't like it. I can rewrite my comment 10 times until I get it right. But think about that. That goes back to the people pleasing and the idea of I have to get it perfect in order to be accepted or not rejected. And that just keeps you trapped in that vicious cycle again. And so here's the other thing. Sometimes you will get rejected. Like, the fear is valid because sometimes it happens. And here's the thing though. If you don't get accepted the first try the experiment again. Think of it like a social experiment. Like, okay, I tried it, because a single rejection or a single failure in anything is not how we assess and judge the whole thing. We can't say, okay, that's a logical fallacy, to build our logic and our case and our judgment around this one isolated instance to say, well, because it happened this one time, it's always going to happen. That's flawed logic. And so we can't build a healthy, internal space. We can't build healthy behaviors if we are allowing the fear and the anxiety, like, oh, right, that was awful. I know it feels awful when it doesn't go as planned, and when you don't get accepted or received the way that you wanted to be received, or you deserved in some instances to be respected and received and everything. But it's literally go again, because here's the thing. You're going to have more success than you're not. I usually, 19 out of 20 times, I usually have a great experience. And for you math people, that's 95% of the time. I have a 95% success rate. And so it seems counterintuitive to get stuck and to let the 5% of those instances have me operate in such fear that I'm paralyzed and not able to actually take the steps forward to literally do the thing that I really want, which is to have meaningful connections with people and to be accepted in different communities and different situations, different settings, different discourse communities that I enter into. Here's something that I do. Okay. So when I go places, I don't care if it's a family function or a friend gathering or a completely foreign place that I've never been before, or if it's after church in a service, I literally scan the room for my people. And when I mean my people, I don't mean like, oh, the people who are like, oh, hey, although it's always nice to see them too. But I'm an introvert. So I look for other introverts. And they're kind of easy to spot usually because they're off awkwardly, standing off in the sidelines, in the shadow, in the corner somewhere. It's literally in like, I don't know how to start a conversation with someone, or I'm just going to stand here until someone else starts a conversation with me. And I find my people, because I know how that is to be paralyzed with fear in the corner, because I don't know how to take the first step, or I'm afraid. I know how. I'm afraid to take the first step because I'm so afraid of the rejection that happens. But again, if we do it enough times then we learn that it's right. We learn that we're not always going to get rejected. We're actually going to receive exactly what we wanted in different forms over and over and over again. when we put ourselves out there. And I'm not just talking about like, if you, like where you're meeting someone and you're like, okay, we're going to become best friends, which I know, like living in a post-COVID era, that I hear everybody saying that to me. What happened to having best friends? What happened to having close friends, being close? And I don't know, there's a brokenness in our whole culture right now. And I feel it. I feel like a lack of closeness to people. I feel like it's just this, people are just shut off, and it's awful. It feels awful to see other people that way, that you know and you care about, and it certainly feels awful to go through that. That is a form of kind of rejection and feeling abandoned, and like, you know, that aloneness where you're like, where is everybody? Where's all the love? That's one type of interaction, and that's one type of relationship. But what I've learned when I keep doing this thing where I go different places, and I'm saying I have a game plan. Like I treat it like a social experiment. I try to make it fun for myself, but I literally have a game plan. It's the strategy is, I know going ahead, I am going to look for people that a person, or if I get somewhere and I'm like, oh, awkward, there are no other introverts that I can see. And if I do that distraction thing where I check my notifications on my phone really quick while I've got one eye kind of still scanning and waiting, and I do those things, but I have a strategy and I have a plan. And I envision how that plan is going to play out. So I'm manifesting that it's going to go well. I'm going to meet someone. And here's the thing. If you're an introvert like I am, even I'm not entirely introverted. I'm like 60-40. I'm 60% introverted, 40% extroverted. But I lean more toward the introvert side in that social settings drain me from all of my energy. And I also do better with that one-on-one or very small groups of people. And so I didn't know that when I was younger. And I learned that, as an adult. And wow, what an eye-opening thing to learn about. Oh my gosh, I do so much better one-on-one. No wonder I was going into all of these social settings and feeling that rejection, because I don't navigate spaces the same way as other people. My husband's an extrovert. He is almost like 90% extrovert, 10% introvert. And he draws his attention from being in the center of big groups. And I'm sorry, he draws his attention. He does that too. He draws his energy. He gets energized. There's that, that excitement that comes out of it. And he's not, he doesn't deal with the same sense of intimidation and the feelings of rejection, because when you're out there, you put yourself out there in bigger settings. It's like fishing, right? If you throw the nets into where all the fish are, you're probably going to catch a bunch of fish. Whereas if you're over here just fishing for one, it's a little harder. The odds are not as much in your favor, but it goes better. And so when I discover that I do really well one-on-one or in really small groups, which I started out just one-on-one. So when I started to recognize, and I read that somewhere in a book about the different personality types, and it was like total brain blowing, where it was like, what? Like, that's a thing? And then I started exercising it, and I started trying it out, like my social experiment. And I go, okay, I'm just going to talk to one person. And the really cool thing is you could be shy to the point of like, you can't open your mouth. Don't mistake being an introvert for being shy, although there are a lot of shy introverts. Being introverted does not mean that you're necessarily shy or that you don't want to talk to people. It just often means that you don't know how to initiate. Again, because look at how the energy works. You draw your energy from from the isolation, from being isolated. So when you start to talk to another introvert and you just start to ask them very meaningful questions, most of the time they're excited to talk about themselves, and they're excited to talk about the things that they love and that they desire and their passions and the things that they're trying to do and accomplish in life, or maybe the things that they have accomplished and their successes. And you can keep a person talking, and sometimes they're even excited to hear about your stuff too. And that can go both ways. But I can tell you that I don't care how the interaction goes, when I start to have these really great conversations with someone, they're always giving me what I craved, which was being accepted, which was not being rejected in this social setting, because it takes forever. An hour feels like forever in a social setting when you are just feeling rejected, like nobody wants to talk to you, nobody cares if you're here, and that's awful. It's hard to get. An hour can feel like 5 hours, or it can feel like 10 minutes. And there are instances where I have people that I talk to like once a year. Like I know, like there's a person who has a picnic once a year, and I know I get excited. Again, I'm already perceiving it before I go, like, oh, I'm going to see that person, and oh, I can't wait to hear about them. I've seen a couple things on their Facebook and their Instagram, and I cannot wait to see that person and talk to them. And it doesn't matter that it's been a year, or maybe it's been 3 summers because they missed the last 2, and you're catching up and you're talking, and you're having these meaningful interactions, and that's okay. Right? So I go to functions of people that I know, and I'm looking for those people, and it doesn't mean that you're only interacting. It's not like I'm going to a function and I'm going to just pick one person and I'm going to latch onto them for the whole function and we're going to get each other through. That's not what I'm talking about either. I'm saying it's okay to work the room also. That's usually what social interactions are, is where we're moving around. One person might walk up, join the conversation. And, I've got to admit, when I was first trying this out, I didn't do as well when more people joined. But, the more I did it, the more comfortable I got at like, okay, I can actually do really well and feel very accepted and not struggle with those fears of anxiety and those fears of, oh my God, I'm going to be rejected. Oh my God, they're judging me. I didn't have to deal with those as much. As I just kept doing it, it was like a muscle. It kept getting stronger and stronger and stronger, so that, if you asked me years ago, like, what do you see yourself doing, 10 years, 20 years, whatever, if you said teacher, I would have laughed at you. Because again, I was the kid who sat behind the tallest person so that the teacher couldn't see me to call on me, because I didn't want to deal with it. Okay. I didn't want to say the wrong things, and I didn't want to get called on, and oh my God, right? Like, what if I say the wrong thing? Everybody's going to laugh if I give the wrong answer. And so I had, a whole set of fears that kept me that way. And then again, I grew. We're supposed to grow. We're supposed to make ourselves uncomfortable, I shouldn't say make ourselves, but yeah, we kind of do make ourselves uncomfortable. We're supposed to go through those uncomfortable feelings and then navigate them. I went from, like, I think I can talk to 2 or 3 people at a time, maybe 5, to like, oh my God, I'm in front of a class of 25, 30 students. And I did that for a decade. And then it was like, while I was doing that, I started publishing my own books, and then I got invited to speak at different gatherings. And then I would walk in a room and there would be a few hundred people, and I'd be like, okay. And I would do it. And sometimes it would just feel like, and I would have to tell myself, I'm just talking to that one person. There was my people, but I did it. And it's not like I did it overnight. It's not like I went from that person who's like, oh my God, I have such a big fear, and I couldn't even talk to one person, and I had to get good at that, to then just being on a stage or being in front of hundreds of people. It was a process. It was a growth process. And so we have to allow ourselves to go through those growth processes, because we don't know. We don't know where they're going to lead us. We don't know where God's going to lead us down the road in our lives. We just have to take those first steps. We have to invest in ourselves. We have to build our strength. We have to let our character shape us. And we have to do all of those things. And so the thing is, though, my fear never entirely disappeared, but the anxiety lessened. So the anxiety started to subside a little bit because I knew the outcome. And I also knew, like, even though when you first feel those feelings and you're like, oh my God, I'm going to die. I'm going to die of this feeling. You don't die. And when you realize that you live through it, and that more times than not, you actually have good experiences and you stay focused on those. We can't dwell on just the one negative thing, or we're going to miss out. That's the thing. That's the danger. If we focus on it, it's okay. There's a time to focus on it. But if all we're doing is like, man, I went to that social thing and I got rejected, or I felt rejected, I didn't feel accepted, and we just focus on that, it will steal our peace, and it will steal all of the successes for all the times that we did have great success, and then we're not focusing on it. We're not appreciating, and then we're putting all this negative energy into something instead of putting the energy in maybe, I don't know, reaching out to those people who did inspire you, who did make you feel accepted, in developing those relationships or staying connected to those people. And so there's a lot of reasons why we don't want to stay stuck just wallowing in those failures, right? That time where we were rejected, and build our whole entire outlook on that in my case, the 5%, because 95% of the time, and any of you college students, like if you're getting a 95% in the class, that's the highest mark you can get. It's a straight A. It's passing. It's excelling. It's the top of the class. And so if you can have a 95% success rate, like you're there. There's maybe no such thing as perfection, but there's 95%, right? That's as close to perfection as I want to get. The thing about anxiety is, in my case, I just kept pushing through it as I approached all these new people and these new situations, and I confronted the fear head on. So when I talk about a few minutes ago about making yourself uncomfortable, that's the instance where you go, okay, I'm going to keep facing this fear over and over and over again. I'm going to keep doing it, and I'm going to keep assessing after the fact. So when you go back and you're like, okay, you're all alone by yourself, and you're like, okay, how did that go? Did it go the way I wanted to? If there's something that didn't go the way I wanted it to, how can I adjust myself in the future? And again, I don't mean how can I make myself a chameleon so that I am, accepted for the wrong reasons, because then you want to belong. You're changing and conforming to belong rather than just being accepted for who you are. And those are two radically different things. By confronting the fear head on, I swear to you, it gets less comfortable. The fear will always be there. Fear is like that sixth sense where the hairs rise up at the back of your neck. And sometimes fear is like, it's a warning. It's fear. If you start to think about fear as this, it's a signal. Like on your dashboard on your car where a signal goes off. If you think about fear as like a signal on your dashboard that says, proceed with caution, right? Proceed with caution. And then you go, what does that mean? Is the road ahead slippery? Is it foggy? What? It makes you question if that's good. It should make us question, how do we proceed into this situation? But to say we have to freeze and not go in, there are times too where we should not keep putting ourselves into, again, those unsafe spaces or questionable spaces, or if that warning light is going on and it's saying literally like the road is broken ahead, like the bridge is completely out. You can't go, you can't go that way. Get the heck off of this road. You've got to pay attention to that also. That fear gauge is a good thing. But when we're talking about fear of rejection, that literally is just the signal for you to proceed with caution. We should always proceed with caution and have that plan, have our plan, and know how we want to respond to things when they don't necessarily go the way we envisioned them going, or when we start to feel those ugly emotions start to get triggered and rise up. What are we going to do about it in that moment? How are we going to navigate that? When you have that plan and you bring that arsenal of all those tools and strategies in with you also into these situations that can trigger your anxiety and trigger that fear of rejection, then you have a better chance of navigating it and arriving at the acceptance and the success that you're after, those ultimate desires that you crave. But let's take a second to talk about anxiety, because it's a common emotion. It really is a common emotion, and it makes us extremely uncomfortable. And when we don't learn how to work through the stress to achieve what we set out to, it often leads to disorders, and it definitely interferes with our daily life. And so a powerful way that I work through anxiety is, again, just doing the thing despite the discomfort. So the fear is there. Do I need to take specific precautions? Do I need to take specific warning? Do I need to wear specific gear into this situation? And then you do it anyway. And when I was a kid, I often had no choice, because you have to go to school. When the bus picks you up or your mom drops you off at school and you're in the 4th grade, you got to walk into the school. Okay. There's no option. You got to go into the school, and you have to literally you might be able to get through the class time, right? Because, you're supposed to sit at your desk and you're not supposed to talk to anybody and listen to the lesson and do your homework and all that stuff. But then there's the lunchtime. Then there's recess. Then there's things like gym class and all the other things that now force you to interact with your peers. And, I'm not talking like, great, if you don't want to interact with people, then that's your choice. But I'm talking to you, the one who shares my desire of wanting to be accepted, of wanting that meaningful connection with people. And so when I was that kid, I had to, I don't remember all the ways that I navigated that playground. I know that fun is one of my love languages. And I was a pretty athletic kid. And so a lot of times my in was just to get them to let me join their games. And, I had to navigate also that rejection that you feel when they're picking teams and you're not the first pick, you're not the second pick, the third, the fourth, and you're like, dear God, I'm the fastest kid on this field. How am I not getting picked for kickball? And you have to say, that's okay. Right? You have to put that in check and say, that's okay, because my ultimate goal is to be able to be on one of these teams. And even if I'm last choice, I get to be on one of these teams and I get to have fun, and maybe I'll make some friends and memories and all those things. Even as a kid, I understood the very basic steps of being uncomfortable, but to get what I wanted. And so, the discomfort wasn't removed from my path. I'm an 80s and 90s girl, man. You knew where the peroxide and the Band-Aids were. And when you hurt yourself and you ran in the house and you're like, I'm bleeding, and you're gushing blood. And then your mom's like, hey, I'm on the phone. And then you're like, okay, you go, you put the peroxide on your own hand, and maybe your sister's knee or whatever. And you're wrapping it with the gauze or the Band-Aid, depending on how big the wound is. And you're doing all of those things because it wasn't removed, right? The discomfort, but also just the idea of, my mom didn't keep me home because I didn't want to go to school because I was worried about the kids not accepting me. She was like, you got to get out of the car. Get out of the car, kid. You're going to school. And so, that's how I grew up. That's how all the kids in my era grew up, is we had to do the uncomfortable things. And yes, I'm sure some of us had more anxiety than others, but we navigated it. We navigated it when we learned that we didn't die or we didn't even almost die from it, then it got easier. And again, you get older and the risks are higher and the fear stakes are higher and the feeling of rejection might increase. But again, you're doing these uncomfortable things because sometimes you don't have a choice, and you're getting through them and you're learning these skills and you're strengthening yourself. So that inner warrior that we're talking about is confident in knowing that at least you tried. There's confidence in that at least you tried, even if you got rejected. I cannot tell you, as a writer, oh my gosh, those of you who are writers or in the performing arts, the amount of rejection that we get is awful. And so I have 3 books. One of them came out in a second edition, and I'm working with a client right now that I co-authored his book, and trying to get agents, trying to get things published is you're sending it. Even the individual pieces in the different collections, I might get 40 rejections before one person's like, yeah, I'll publish that short story. Yeah, I'll publish that poem. I'll publish that essay, whatever. Is some of them, they never get accepted. And it's well, thank God it's coming out in a book, and I finally get to bring it to readers. But it's if I just let the rejection just weigh me down, I don't know if I'd be able to get back up and send it out again. But that has really helped me overcome, hugely overcome my fear of rejection, because, it has helped me overcome the fear, but it's also helped me just develop the confidence. I'm sorry. I know that the writing's good. I'm sending it out when it's polished, and it's good for the writer that I am at that time. And I know that my writing has value. I know it's something that I'm called to do. I know it. I know I'm supposed to write, and I just have to keep doing it and sending it out. And I have to keep writing, and I have to keep making those stories better, polishing them. And I know that there's a place for them. And so that confidence that I say, I'm not placing my value on the rejection. I'm placing my value on the beautiful contents that I've created, this beautiful work of art that I've created. And I know it has importance, right? It's giving voice to different things in our times. And so I draw a lot of confidence from that. And so maybe that's another way that you can build your confidence in this particular area where you're trying to navigate this fear of rejection. Maybe you won't entirely overcome the anxiety. Maybe you won't entirely overcome the fear of rejection, but it will be something that maybe you can navigate differently and build your confidence and your value differently, because you're not giving people the power. So when you remove that power to say, you don't get to define my value based on the rejection, or you don't get to define how self-assured I am about the thing that I'm trying to get accepted, when you start to change the way that you view those things, then internally that whole space changes and the way you navigate those things changes. Like I can even say now, walking into a situation where I feel that rejection right away, where someone might not even give me the time of day. I haven't even walked up yet. And you're like, that's going to be one of the 5%, is I don't internalize that. And I don't let that define my value. I don't let that, squash my confidence, because it's not rooted to that. And so I don't allow it to be rooted to that. So that, this is exactly how I work through my anxiety and how I work, to kind of navigate that, the fear of rejection. And I start by changing my view of it and then changing my response to it. And then ultimately, the actual outcomes then open the way for receiving the outcomes we desire. So if you do these things, then it opens the way for the outcomes to desire. It is one of those, like, if you do this plus this, it equals this. And I do get into this topic more in another episode in the coming weeks, but I want to leave you with a challenge to do your own social experiment. So I want you to think about, I know we've got the 4th of July weekend upon us. We've got a whole summer of different weddings and graduation parties and bridal showers and baby showers and birthdays and all these different backyard picnics and whatever reason people try to bring everybody together. I challenge you to do your own social experiment, to ahead of time be imagining how you can, if you're the introvert, how you can do these one-on-one interactions, and you can set yourself up. Maybe you are going to a place that is not new, that it's a place that like, there's going to be people there. There's going to be a particular person there who I love to see. Is that have that plan and practice these strategies and see if you also have a 95% success rate or whatever success rate. Do your own experiment and see what works, and come back and adjust it. And maybe you're adjusting it in real time. Like, because I meditate on these things, because it is so important to me to master these fears and to navigate life despite the fears and the anxiety that sometimes tries to slow me down or keep me from doing things that I love doing. Now it's almost like you can become an improv artist. And what I mean by that is, if you self-reflect, like I'm a very self-reflective person. If you're a self-reflective person and you're like, how can I learn from previous experiences so that I can improve these areas in my life, so I can become a better version of myself and so that I can navigate spaces better. If you are that person like I am, and you come back and you're assessing it, you start to develop other muscles. Like, how you have the minimus muscles and the medius muscles and the maximus muscles, and they all have different jobs in different body parts. And so that same thing can happen when you strength train and you come into your internal space and you become very self-reflective. I mean, don't overthink it. You're not trying to perfect. This is not a point where you're like, okay, how do I perfect this? And, don't make yourself crazy over planning how you're going to act. Just think about self-reflect. Did that go the way I wanted to? What was good about it? How did that work? You dissect it, and then you think about it because you want to recreate those experiences. Is that when you strengthen these areas, you become that improv artist who does it in real time. So as you're navigating a space where you're talking one-on-one, or you are talking in a small group, and you ask a question and you read the person's body language and you go, oh, that was not a good question for them. Could have been a good question. It's not a question for them, or not the right time or space for that. And so then you adjust in real time. So because again, you're trying to avoid that. Obviously, a lot of things. You don't want to make someone else feel awful. You don't want to trigger them into a trauma that ruins the whole atmosphere, or maybe sets them up to ruin the whole entire event. And you're after that like good, meaningful interaction that allows you to feel accepted, fulfills all those cravings and those desires that you have. Maybe you're even trying to pursue a more meaningful, in-depth relationship with this individual. And so you're reading in real time those interactions that you're having, their body language or their responses, and you're adjusting in real time. Because you already know, like, oh, you can improvise now. Like, I normally do this or that, and that usually is really well. But now I just ask that person like about their family, and I could just see that they just started to shut down. And so then you start to redirect, and then, again, there's no formula for interacting with people, but hopefully you've had enough of an exchange with that person to know where you could navigate back. Like, okay, when I asked them about their new job, they were really passionate about it, and they were really excited about how they applied their college degree to this job or whatever. So then you can slowly, very subtly backtrack into this area where you know that they're going to be excited again. And that's one example of, the power of just going back and self-reflecting and learning in real time how to better navigate interactions with people. And it's helped me also too. Like, I know you might not be a speaker, you might not get on stages or get in front of a classroom as a teacher, but in my case, it helped me read an entire room, because sometimes that could be, you're maybe not just talking about one person there. Challenge is to be, received and accepted by a larger group of individuals, because you ultimately want them to listen and hear and receive what it is you are offering them. And you have to be able to read that room. And sometimes you're asking questions and you can't prepare for every question that someone in the audience is going to ask. And so again, that idea of strengthening these areas so that you can improvise and just be ready, because you're strong in your confidence, you're strong in your purpose, and you're grounded in these things. You're grounded in your value. You have a place at this table. And so then you can navigate that space, whatever the space is, whether it's one person, 10 people, 1,000 people, you can navigate that space in real time. You don't have to wait until you get home. Like when I was a kid, oh my gosh, someone would say something super witty and, or super biting and and I would be like, there was nothing would come to mind. Like I had no response. And then I'd be walking home and I'd be so mad at myself. Like, why didn't I say something? And then I'd be falling asleep, or maybe it's the next morning I wake up and I'm like, oh, I should have said that. And I went from being that person who then was the person who somebody said something to me, and literally I'm already translating it. I'm already going in real time, and boom, I come back with the comeback. And I'm not saying I'm one-upping people with an insult. That's what I'm usually, again, trying to have meaningful engagements with people and say meaningful things. So even if I'm saying something that might be critical, or, someone might see as cutting, I'm trying to deliver it with conviction, not with shame and condemnation. Because again, I want them to receive it if I'm going to take the time to say it. So I challenge you, go into these environments. You're going to have a social setting. And even if you don't have a plan, you don't have to have a plan. The plan should just be, I'm going to have all these opportunities to enter into these different social experiments and just see how they go. I'm going to try. If it's one-on-one, maybe you are extroverted, so you don't have to do that one-on-one thing. Whatever speaks to you, try it. Do your social experiment and then come back and assess it. How did it go? Did it help you? Is all that you received, was it the rejection, or were there areas of acceptance, or what happened? And how does that fit into the larger equation of you dealing with this fear? So I want to close this episode by reminding you that the whole point of working through your grief is to restore that inner warrior so you can navigate the cycle and what comes after it. That's why the 8th and final stage in my recovery is recovery. It's the beginning of your new journey toward restoration. In the end, a healed and whole inner warrior is a powerful force. Today, we gained a better understanding of the grief process, why your inner healing areas are connected, and how to deal with these. These are the first steps to truly healing and restoring your confidence and happiness. You won't want to miss the next episode. Here we'll discuss how it's okay to wrestle with life's complexities and grit, which is the second of the 5 secrets of emotionally and physically working through your fear, doubt, and anxiety to restore your confidence and worth. And don't forget to join that Facebook group, the Restore Your Inner Warrior Sisterhood, and to subscribe to my podcast and email list.
Well, girl, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If so, don't forget to follow my channel and share it with girlfriends who also want to restore their self-worth and confidence. Also, if this podcast inspired you, consider leaving a 5-star written review on Apple Podcasts. And as you go through your day, may your empowered spirit, heart, and mind guide you. Catch new episodes every Tuesday and Friday. Ciao.